Welcome back to Awfulness Recaps. In almost no time you will tune in to a startling story described by me. Dread looks for you. Keep an eye out and fare thee well. The organization where Sam works intends to go on a retreat. Without further ado, before the excursion, Sam sees a print on the transport steps that says "Observe your step," and he feels wrong on the manner in which Isaac passes on his seat to make a confidential get back to when they get on an extension under development. Sam feels unrelaxed. Abruptly, the transport is come by one of the laborers and Sam harms his thumb. Outside, high breezes start to blow and Sam feels the transport shake. He inquires as to whether he feels something similar, however, Peter doesn't actually. Sam anyway knows something's off base. Later, while a specialist cuts a piece of the span, a brake fans out from it, all through the extension, first sinking a vehicle before the transport. Seeing this, Sam snatches his sweetheart, Molly, to get off the transport while others follow. When the extension starts to break off, Peter's better half Candace first gets caught after she coincidentally diverges. Then she drops off, not into the water, be that as it may, onto a boat sail shaft underneath and passes on. At the point when Isaac returns and notification the catastrophe, it's as of now past the point of no return. The transport drops off and he is ended, while the extension is snapping, separated Sam. Also, the other travelers make their way to the furthest limit of the scaffold. However, they are in the end caught when the span abruptly breaks halfway. Presently, the best way to get to the opposite end of the extension is the connecting rail that conveys the substantial, utilizing the idea of women first. Sam requests that Molly go prior to him. However, before Sam can utilize the rail himself, he hears Olivia sobbing for help later, dropping her glasses, and is not really capable to see, so he hurries to carry her to the rail. For the second time, women first. Olivia creeps since she's somewhat blind and follows Molly's voice. She gets close to Molly, however too far off to go after her hand effectively. The rail gives way soon enough and she slides off into the water beneath. Tragically, a vehicle drops from the span straightforwardly on top of her, as Nathan makes a run for it as far as possible of the scaffold with his manager Dennis. He gets dispensed with out of nowhere. Sam rapidly sees the scaffold giving way and hurries to the edge before it starts to drop individuals off. Dennis nearly drops off as well, however holds firmly onto something. Anyway, hot black top spills on him at the same time, consuming him before he gives up. Peter from the back sees the scaffold going down and hurries to take hold of a bowed railing on the finish of the extension, as it were left for him to ascend. By and by, he holds back to see Sam do the same, and Sam hops not long before the span goes down. Sadly, the railing is excessively powerless for two anyway. It bears their weight just to leave them with something grave to manage as they battle to come to the main A. Scarcely any shafts fire straightforwardly at Peter, ending him. Seeing this, overreacting Sam starts to hurry to the top, yet he doesn't get so fortunate as he's ultimately ended. Then he awakens to understand that it was every one of the days he's actually sitting unblemished there on the transport, and yet the bus station's the same way, and he harms his thumb. Similar series of occasions as he saw in his days starts to unfurl, and he promptly comprehends the gravity of the circumstance. Immediately he goes to get Molly while cautioning everybody to get off the transport, saying the extension will fall. Dennis lets him know it's simply development. Dennis later requests that Peter get to them in the event that something happens to them. Candace additionally follows him as he does. Simultaneously, the manager gets out and the scaffold snaps, causing a break that spreads all through the extension. Anyway, just 8 of the workers figured out how to come to the opposite end before it tumbles off into the stream with the other 17 on it. Sam is taken in for cross-examination by the FBI about how he realized it would work out. What's more, he tells Specialist Block he just had a vision. Block first thinks of him as a psychological militant. However, soon he receives a message that the breakdown was caused because of high winds and primary harm from the development. The following day, before the memorial service of the 17 dead representative beginning, Sam's partners are worried about the event. They realize there must be an explanation. Sam realized the extension would go down, however they at last put it behind them. After the memorial service, while Peter and Sam stroll back home, a more interesting gives them a message that passing could do without to be cheated and encourages them to watch out. Peter just thinks that he is frightening and leaves. In any case, Sam stays back, figuring out that there is something else to the unpleasant man besides meets the eye. Subsequent to working the main shift at a eatery, Sam goes to Molly's home admits to her that when the scaffold begun to implode, all he considered was getting her to somewhere safe and secure. In the meantime, Peter meets Candace at the exercise center, going to begin her last practice schedule for the school aerobatic title. She feels ill-equipped, however Peter energizes her. The rec center feels hot, a circuit tester fixes the fans, however unintentionally leaves a stripped link on the exercise center floor as Candace is going to begin rehearsing. She feels something is off base, however. Go on by the by, a screw drops from the roof fan on the gymnastic pillar, obscure to her then. As she goes for her subsequent practice routine, she almost steps on the link, which currently has water dribbling on it from the roof. She would have been shocked by the water streaming near her foot, yet she fortunately drops a hand towel on it and steps rather on the towel as she begins her second schedule. The screw holding the bar is going to come free. Be that as it may, it at last doesn't. Rather, a similar screw Candace missed on the pillar harms someone else rehearsing after her. She trips, causing a fog that then, at that point, diverts Candace. This thus makes her swing off the bar and hit the floor hard, breaking her spine and kicking the bucket. Later, while Sam feels for Peter at the rec center, he sees the unpleasant man once more. Also, asks why he's following them. Back at the organization, Olivia trusts that Candace just passed on due to the nature of tumbling. Additionally, Dennis is occupied with chipping away at more than he can deal with, since the vast majority of his laborers are dead and the organization will be closed down soon. Subsequently, Isaac then again goes around the dead staff's work areas, taking their assets. There he likewise takes a spa ticket and goes to the spa soon thereafter, subsequent to being gone to by a beautiful woman. Furthermore, laid on the bed, he's amazed to observe that an elderly person is the one taking care of the treatment meeting while she adjusts his bones. One of the bed stands squeaks, obscure to them. Next, he's placed on a gentle needle therapy and educated to rest for 30 minutes later, which the lady leaves the candlelit room in the wake of turning off the electric bulbs. The lights bafflingly light a fire. Also, Isaac awakens to call for help in his battle to escape the bed. The bedstand gives way and he falls level all over and blacks out. All at once, a cleaning liquid spills out on the floor. In any case, nothing occurs until Isaac awakens to track down the needles currently inside him. He then, at that point, attempts to escape the room, however stops at the point when his telephone unexpectedly rings. He thinks of accepting the call since it must be his better half, and yet a candle drops on the liquid and causes a blast that makes him trip. Cheerful Isaac perceives how fortunate he is when the fire doesn't get to him in size. Be that as it may, a Buddha sculpture drops, sadly, straight on his head and smashes it. Sam is persuading Molly to go with him to Paris when Peter presents to them the news of Isaac's demise. Again, he sees the dreadful man at the scene and pursues him this time. The rest follow while he asks the man what his identity is. Incidentally, he's simply a coroner who has seen such cases where a fortunate few individuals endure a catastrophe, and passing later comes later them individually. He says that they abbreviate demise by getting away from what occurred on the extension and can't bear to get away from it. Ultimately, he then, at that point, gives them the main answer for the unfortunate circumstance, and that is to take another person's life expectancy by killing them. This is the point at which they then grasp that passing is staying nearby them. Yet, Sam understands that he safeguarded Molly in his vision, so she's most likely not going to kick the bucket. Yet, Olivia and Dennis are missing at the scene, so they organize to illuminate them right away. In the meantime, Olivia visits a center to go through a medical procedure. She blows a gasket while she's under the hardware. Her head is firmly held set up and a gadget is utilized to augment her eye. Accidentally, her teddy bear's eye pops out and drops on the floor. Before long, the specialist leaves to get a record. Meanwhile, some water inadvertently drops, sprinkling water into an electric attachment and causing the gear to break down. When she sees, she attempts to no end to go after the crisis button. In the wake of calling for help, the gear arrives at a basic stage and the laser blinds her eye. Before long, Sam and Molly rush in to protect her. Be that as it may, she gets up and stumbles on the teddy bears as she dropped on the floor and drops through the window with her eye jumping out. Sam later figures out that the new passings are precisely in the request he saw in his vision. He finds that after Olivia, Nathan is the close to bite the dust. At the organization plant, Nathan contends with a laborer Roy while feeling something is off base. He sees flashes and the probability of a crane snare falling on them, so he attempts to push Roy far removed In any case, Roy falls and gets found out by the snare dispensing with him. Meanwhile, Peter cautions Dennis about the kill or be killed circumstance. However, Dennis doesn't appear to trust anything he says. Then they meet at the industrial facility to talk about what happened, where Peter compromises Nathan into uncovering that he, truth be told, killed Roy to guarantee his life expectancy. Peter then, at that point, requests to know who's straight away from Sam. However, before he can uncover it, Dennis comes asking what occurred, and at a similar time a wrench sent off by the belt sander divides his face. Later, Sam promises to quit living in dread. What's more, he goes to work at the cafe that night anyway. All that he sees panics him to demise. Then he takes the proposal to understudy in Paris from his eatery chief. That evening after work, Peter visits Molly and Sam during a date, looking furious. In the wake of knowing he's straight away, Peter informs them concerning having had various chances to take someone else's life, yet he couldn't on the grounds that they didn't have the right to pass on. Then, at that point, he questions why Molly has the right to live and attracts a weapon to kill her. Sam salvages Molly at once and they run to the kitchen, where Peter later gets up with them and takes Sam out, since killing him won't help him. He then turns a couple of stoves on, expecting to explode the spot. Specialist Obstruct shows at the scene soon, and Peter dispenses with him anyway. We as a whole understand that Peter currently truly can't allow Molly to live subsequent to seeing him murder Block, so he actually endeavors to kill her. Sam later awakens and saves Molly, making the weapon drop on a stove. During the battle, Peter pounds Sam and Molly returns to protect him. When Peter means to cut him, he overwhelms Molly and endeavors to wound her. However, Sam takes him out. In the meantime, the pistol on the stove is so super hot that it fires in Sam's direction, neglecting to kill Sam, causing him to conclude that he is at long last safe. After 14 days, Sam and Molly are on a plane to Paris when two of the understudies on the plane caution that everyone ought to get off the plane in the wake of having a vision. At the point when Sam hears this after the departure, he understands the situation. However, it's currently too late. The motors burst into flames and Molly is sucked out and dispensed with before the plane then detonates with Sam inside. In the meantime, Nathan is told at Roy's remembrance by a colleague that Roy's autopsy shows that Roy would have ultimately passed on from a cerebrum illness, and that implies exchanging Roy's life never counted. All of a sudden, the landing stuff of the crashing plane gets through the rooftop and pounds him. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.